Hello, my name is Mitch Jones. I'm a student at California Baptist University and a teacher at China Jiliang University, and I want to talk today about my potential organizational method for the 7 traditions of communication and how I think this will work. I refer to it as the stepladder model, and the general metaphor is that you have lower, like basic communication theories on which other communication theories are built and so on up the ladder. So you can't have the upper rungs without the lower rungs, for example. So I will be going through that and the different categories of theories and how I think they make something resembling a ladder. Obviously, I am not an artist, and the ladder you see in the corner here is the only ladder in this presentation, and I sincerely apologize. Given time and effort, I could almost definitely make something that is marginally worse. So let's go with this. Um, since communication theory does not exist in a vacuum, many theories wind up being built upon by other theories. And this model hopes to simplify the way we see these theories. This will hopefully be useful for learning, for study, and just for categorization of the communication theory. So that is my overall goal for this. This is rung one. Definitions. I made this category of some of the oldest communication theories that more or less explain what communication is and how people should communicate rather than explaining more in-depth ideas. For example, ontology just asks simple questions like why are we here? We have axiology, epistemology. These are all very, I don't want to say simple, they're very basic theories. They try to explain why things exist, and that is very fundamental for communication theory, but obviously other things have been built upon that over time. Um, they deal with the nature of being and the nature of communication, and many of these are taken as given facts today. For instance, the idea that humans exist is a fundamental truth that we accept in order to accept that the media exists. And the rest of these theories are built upon the assumptions made in rung one. So this is the first step up our ladder of communication. Rung two is relationships. Since the term we're talking about communication, the term communication suggests that there are multiple parties. Since you can't communicate with yourself, therefore multiple people have to be accounted for. And these theories are theories that deal with building relationships. Things like uncertainty reduction, social penetration, and proxemics explain how people build and modify relationships and what the changes are to those built relationships. All other theories after this rung deal with relationships in some way because communication is about relationships. When you communicate, a relationship is fundamental to how you see things. And some, like, for instance, uncertainty reduction is how, as you build a relationship, you become more confident sharing more information, that sort of thing. These are all very, like, relationship based. Rung three is social status. This is assuming there's multiple people. This is also assuming relationships exist. Some theories I found were the narrative paradigm, social learning, and standpoint theory that explain how people communicate differently if they see themselves as very high up or very low status and what that does for them. The narrative paradigm is an interesting one on this list, but it says that we judge a person's truthfulness or their how good their story is based on how well they're presented, what their facts are, how good they are at speaking, etc. And that's a facet of status as well. So I put it on this section instead of relationships or basic communication. A person's self-perception is crucial in how they communicate and who they communicate to, and that'll be instrumental in future rungs. So further up the ladder, people have an understanding of who they are and who other people are in the context of their societal status. And in terms of society, we also have group approval, obviously, because if you have a sense of self-worth and it's lower or higher, people tend to associate that with a group. And this rung tends to deal with people seeking approval from a group and what people will do to match a group's dynamics. A very famous phrase is groupthink, and that is a theory that I have on here. But we also mentioned spiral of silence and social learning, how people tend to adapt to a group rather than make their own way. Um, since social status is such a crucial part of groups, it's hard to put this before, or to it had to go before this, but both will play into each other. And for a long time, it was difficult for me to decide which one would be rung 3 and which one would be rung 4. But I've decided that it's more, you have to have a sense of social status to have a sense of group. Rung 5 is self-affirmation. This rung deals with how people build and affirm their own beliefs. And there are a lot of very interesting theories about this, and a lot of very interesting historical precedents about this particular rung of the ladder. And while the details may differ, uses in gratification theory, elaboration likelihood model, and confirmation bias, I'll explain that people prefer to listen to things that agree with them and avoid things that challenge their views. So this is how you can get more extreme ideas and get people towards certain, like, very intense actions and thoughts. This theory explains why even in ideal conditions, convincing someone of something they do not believe is very difficult. And I think this has to exist after groupthink and those kind of theories, because you have to have groups that are of a certain way for a person to decide they believe a certain thing. A good example, well, a terrible example of this is the Holocaust, where people tended to believe that the Jews were horrible people based on the facts presented by a larger group, and those that didn't believe that struggled, because those that believed it were constantly being reaffirmed that their ideas were correct, and those that did not were being constantly like rebuffed. Rung 6 is intercultural communication, because obviously there are different cultures in the world, and this has become a very important part of people's communication. A lot of times when you talk about intercultural communication, you see people thinking like us versus them, like, it's me and those Russians, but that's not necessarily correct within the context of communication. And a lot of these theories try to explain cultures for other people to allow them to better communicate with other people. So the ones I found were cultural studies, which is just kind of a general study of culture, face negotiation theory, which explains countries that have a high priority for honor, like places in Asia, for example, and genderlect, which was it was a hard choice to put here. But upon reading the theory, they discuss how gender is a culture in and of itself. So I thought it appropriate to put it in the intercultural communication section. Whether or not one believes that gender is in fact a unique culture, or if it's just a facet of being human, is up to the person. Obviously, genderlect is not universally accepted, but it is very interesting. And the final rung is media communication. Since the media is broadcasting to many types of people, different social statuses, different groups, different cultures, this had to be built upon by everything else. This is like mass communication to a lot of people. So I see this as the top of the ladder, the final thing. The ones I found were cultivation theory, agenda setting theory, and priming, which all deal with the potential effects of the media on what people believe or focus on. Different theorists have different levels of tolerance for the media. For example, here's one that I did not put on my list, but the hypodermic needle theory, which came out quite a few years ago, states that the media can inject subversive ideas into people's brain. So by viewing material that is not in line with proper moral society, you can actually brainwash a person, which I think is extreme but interesting. And yeah, that is my stepladder model for communication theory. Thank you for listening. I hope you have an excellent day. That's how I chose to end this.